Um, Very good afternoon to all of you. Thank you very much for joining this special media briefing that we are conducting from this beautiful city of Bali in Indonesia on the occasion of Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi's ongoing visit to this city of Bali for the G20, 17th G20 summit. Actually, the summit proceedings are still underway with the third session on digital transformation, and you'd have just seen that the Prime Minister has made his intervention there. We are doing this briefing now because Prime Minister would be leaving directly from there to the airport. We have a bit of a shortage of time, but let me just introduce people who have come here to give you a sense of what the conversations have been and the other elements of this important visit. Of course, Foreign Secretary Sir Shri Vinay Quatra is with us. We also have the pleasure of having our ambassador to India and Timor-Leste, Shri Manoj Kumar Bharti, as well as our sous Sherpa for the G20 process, Shri Abhay Thakur. Sir, Foreign Secretary Sir, if I could request you to say opening remarks, and then we will take a few questions.
Thank you, Arindam. Ambassador Manoj Bharti, our sous Sherpa, Mr. Abhay Thakur, and dear friends, thank you very much for coming here this afternoon in this beautiful city where it's pouring outside. So thanks very much for coming in these large numbers despite the heavy rain outside. As Arindam mentioned, Prime Minister's visit to Bali to participate in the ongoing G20 summit is still continuing. It's my pleasure to do this special briefing. I'll be making brief remarks and thereafter, depending on the time, take some questions. Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi, as you all know, arrived on 14th November, late evening, and since then he has had a series of engagements. Even as we meet here, as Arindam just mentioned, the third session of the G20 Leaders Summit is underway, and following this will be a closing ceremony where the G20 presidency will be handed over to India. Thereafter, Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi is expected to have several bilateral meetings. These, as of now, include Germany, Indonesia, Italy, Australia, and UK. He will leave for the airport directly from the venue, and thus we have taken this opportunity to do this quick briefing. As you are all aware, Prime Minister's first engagement in Bali was the official welcome by His Excellency the President of Indonesia. We have been working very closely with Indonesia to support their presidency, and we have also worked with Indonesia to give a larger voice to the global south in the G20. In the G20, Prime Minister's first intervention was during the session on food and energy security. The text of this has already been shared. You would have seen in Prime Minister's intervention the emphasis on the impact of contemporary developments on the developing world. He particularly underlined the criticality of resilient supply chains for food, fertilizer, and energy, and the need for affordable finance for smooth energy transition for the global south. Prime Minister Modi also highlighted India's effort to further food security for our own citizens, as also for the needs of other developing countries, and in this context shared India's own achievements and experiences, including the practices of natural farming, and called upon the G20 members to celebrate the International Year of Millets 2023. Prime Minister later attended the second session on the health. Prime Minister met the US President Biden and Indonesian President on the margins of the G20 summit yesterday. Prime Minister Modi affirmed that G20 is the premier forum for international economic cooperation and underlined the importance of G20 continuing to demonstrate its capacity to bring together major economies to overcome the global challenges. In his brief bilateral interaction with President Biden, Prime Minister reviewed the continuing deepening of the India-US strategic partnership and expressed satisfaction about the ongoing strong cooperation between the two countries in groupings such as the Quad, ITU2, etc. Prime Minister Modi and President Biden agreed to maintain close cooperation during India's G20 presidency. Prime Minister also had several pull-aside meetings with leaders of the G20 members, guest countries and international organizations yesterday. Yesterday afternoon, Prime Minister also addressed and interacted with the Indian community and Friends of India in Bali. He highlighted the close cultural and civilization linkages between India and Indonesia and the role of diaspora in deepening these vibrant and ancient ties. The warmth and respect that the 700-odd Indians and Friends of India in Bali was visible for all of us to see there. Today, as Arindam just said, Prime Minister has concluded his intervention during the session on digital transformation. This is an area where India is a global leader, and Prime Minister used this opportunity to highlight actions taken by India and offered to share our expertise in this space. Prime Minister Modi highlighted the importance of technology and an open, inclusive and empowering public digital infrastructure in fostering global economic transformation, building inclusive societies, empowering billions of people and improving livelihoods. Digital transformation will also feature among the key priorities during India's G20 presidency that commences on 1st of December. This morning, Prime Minister joined the other G20 leaders on a visit to the mangrove forests. India also has, as you all know, large mangrove reserves, and these serve as a refuge for biodiversity as well as substantial carbon sinks. We recently joined the Mangrove Alliance for Climate, led by the UAE and Indonesia. This initiative brings the world together to advance the global cause of mangroves. Apart from the bilateral meeting with Indonesia, Prime Minister also today had earlier a working lunch with President Macron of France. Defense, civil nuclear cooperation, trade and economy, and new areas of economic partnership constituted key topics of the conversation during this working lunch meeting. As I've earlier mentioned, he would be having several other bilaterals later during the day. I listed out the countries of where he would be having bilateral as of now. In these, if I could just mention, Germany, with whose Chancellor Prime Minister has already met twice earlier this year, is an important partner, and Chancellor Scholz and Prime Minister are likely to take forward the discussions and the outcomes which they both agreed on during the 6th India-Germany intergovernmental consultations which were held earlier in Berlin in May this year. This will be Prime Minister's first meeting with the UK, the newly elected UK Prime Minister, Mr. Rishi Sunak, and it will provide an opportunity to review the wide-ranging India-UK comprehensive partnership and the progress made on the Roadmap 2030 for future relations. Prime Minister also will be having his first meeting with the Italian Prime Minister, and both leaders will review their multi-sectoral partnership. Our relations with Australia have been steadily deepening, expanding, both bilaterally and also in several plurilateral constructs. Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Albanese, when they meet later this evening, are likely to discuss cooperation across different sectors: trade, investment, education, defense, critical minerals, etc. The closing ceremony of the G20 will be held shortly, where, as I mentioned earlier, the President of Indonesia will hand over the gavel to Prime Minister in a symbolic handover of the presidency. The outcome document of the G20 summit has been adopted by consensus. India worked constructively and cooperated with Indonesia and others towards this goal. You will find that some of the key outcomes in the outcome document reflect the priorities and vision of Prime Minister. India's priorities such as the views of the global south, sustainable lifestyles, climate financing, nutritious food, multilateral reforms, global digital health, networks, digital networks, etc., they all find mention in the document. The consensus document going forward will be a positive development as we take over the presidency of the G20 on 1st of December. I would stop here and take questions at this stage. Thank you.
One by one. Thank you very much, sir. Before we move on to the question, please let me lay out the ground rules. Please introduce yourself and the organization that you represent. We will take all the hands one by one. I start with you this side and I come to you.
Hi, Sam Siddhant from WION. When it comes to negotiation of the communique, the role played by India in bridging the divide between West and Russia, what was perhaps a constructive role in bringing the two sides together? If you can talk about that.
Okay, 1 second. One by one. We'll take a few questions together. I'll come to you. Yeah, go ahead. Ram Prakash ji, microphone.
सर मैं ब्रह्म प्रकाश हूँ जी न्यूज़ से। मेरा सवाल ये है कि भारत लगातार इंटरनेशनल प्लेटफॉर्म पर जिस तरह से आतंकवाद का खतरा है उसको लेकर बात करता रहा है, क्या G20 के मंच पर किसी सत्र में भारत ने इसके खतरे को लेकर बात की या द्विपक्षीय जो बातचीत हो रही हैं उसमें ये मुद्दा उठाया कि कैसे दुनिया आखिर इससे निपटे जिससे भारत लगातार जूझ रहा है? थैंक यू।
नीरज, 1 second. नीरज।
सर नीरज हूँ न्यूज़ 18 इंडिया से। G20 के बैठक में कल जो डिनर आयोजित हुआ था उसमें एक ऐसी तस्वीर आई जिसका लंबे समय से लोगों को इंतज़ार भी है, राष्ट्रपति शी जिनपिंग से हैंडशेक करते हुए। क्या उस हैंडशेक के दौरान प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी की जो बातचीत हुई संक्षिप्त मुलाकात में, क्या अगले साल भारत में होने वाले G20 सम्मेलन के लिए अनौपचारिक तौर पे उन्हें आमंत्रित किया है, या जो मुलाकात हुई है उसमें क्या बात हुई है?
आपने उसको एक स्टेटमेंट तो दे दिया पहले, वो मैं फॉरेन सेक्रेटरी को नहीं दूंगा वो स्टेटमेंट, क्वेश्चन बाद में। एक सेकंड बिफोर दैट आई विल कम टू मनीष। यू हैड अ क्वेश्चन? नो मनीष।
Foreign Secretary Manish Chand, India Rights Network. You know, what was the precise contribution of India to the shaping of the Bali Declaration? Because there was so much speculation that there won't be any outcome document. It's like a huge breakthrough of sorts. And also going forward, what was the support, expressed by world leaders for India's presidency of G20?
You had a question, Abhishek?
Sir.
Yeah, go ahead.
So there was a talk about, I'm Abhishek from CNN News 18. There was talk about Prime Minister's phrase that this is not an era of war finding a place in joint communique. So now, since you have said that it has been adopted, has that phrase also find the mention there? And were there any opposition to have those things in the joint declaration from any other members of the meeting?
1 second. Maha?
So in the first working session, the Prime Minister spoke about no restrictions on energy movement. Was that in reference to the possibility of G7 coming out with a price cap on Russian oil? And has any leader raised that issue with the Prime Minister, and how India will respond to the price cap?
There was a okay. You had a query? 1 second. I saw your hand first, please.
I'm Ravinder Singh.
No, you need to go microphone.
Sir, I'm Ravinder Singh Robin. I contribute to BBC. Do you expect President Putin to be a part of the next coming G20 summit in India? Will it be a challenge for India?
Sorry, challenge?
For India to bring all the leaders.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'll take it one round. We have a bit of a short time crunch. Please.
सर प्रणय उपाध्याय ABP न्यूज़ से। सर भारत की प्रेसिडेंसी एज्यूम करने से पहले ये जो मीटिंग थी इसके अंदर प्रधानमंत्री ने भारत की G20 प्रेसिडेंसी को लेकर क्या भूमिका तैयार की, या क्या विषय जो हैं जिनके ऊपर विश्व नेताओं के साथ समर्थन मांगा हो, या किस तरीके से उसका आधार तैयार किया गया इस बैठक के अंदर?
हमारी प्रेसिडेंसी के बारे में?
हमारी प्रेसिडेंसी से पहले।
There was somebody else? There are some more people? Okay. Maybe let me take one of the topics. I've got a few questions on the document, outcome document. There was some question on President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister's brief interaction. Anybody else on that one? You have one? Okay, Geeta, I'll give you that. Let me just tick off. I don't want to come back to the same questions.
Just a specific question, Geeta Mohan from India Today, on whether if Prime Minister's speech from SCO, where he said this is not the era of war, has that been incorporated and included in the outcome
On the
document?
Xi Jinping question I had, but this has already been asked. Okay, Geeta.
Xi Jinping.
Huh? No, it's okay. I've heard your question. That
On
was
Xi Jinping, did any conversation on border tensions come up?
border tension. Okay, that is the Xi Jinping. So that's the second question. Okay. Any more hands left? Any other questions? You had one. Okay, last couple of questions. We'll close it here.
Hi sir, this is Ashish from TV9. सर इंडिया ने बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट रोल प्ले किया है शेरपाज इंट्रैक्शन के बीच में भी हमने देखा था कि लगातार जो वर्ल्ड वॉर रशिया यूक्रेन वॉर को टेंशन को लेकर लगातार आज सुबह से लगभग सारे लीडर्स के स्केड्यूल पूरा ऑफ मार्क हो गए। G7 की भी मीटिंग बुलाई गई थी। इंडिया एक इम्पॉर्टेंट रोल प्ले करता रहा है दोनों साइड्स को समझाने के लिए। क्या उस पोलैंड में जो अटैक हुआ उसके बाद में इंडिया की तरफ से कोई बातचीत हुई है, कोई फोन कॉल्स हुए हैं?
सॉरी, आप फिर से क्वेश्चन को दोहराएंगे? क्वेश्चन क्या है? आपने काफी
बेसिकली सर इंडिया ने क्या आज वो पोलैंड में जब मिसाइल्स गए थे उसके बाद में हमारी तरफ से कोई भी
पोलैंड के बाद आज की बात एनी अदर टॉपिक्स?
सर शेरपा लेवल में हमने सुना था जॉइंट कम्युनिटी को लेकर के कुछ प्रॉब्लम्स थे वहां पर के दो हिस्सों में लोग बटे हुए दिखे। क्या ये जो अभी जॉइंट डॉक्यूमेंट आ रहा है उसमें भी उस तरह की चीजें थी रूस और यूक्रेन को लेकर के, और अगर ऐसा था तो भारत ने क्या कुछ अपनी तरफ से सजेशन उसमें दिए?
ओके, आई सॉ वन मोर हैंड एंड आई ओके इलिया गो अहेड।
What Ilya Arkhip of Bloomberg News.
Bloomberg
News. What is your message to Russia and President Putin, given that is your this is Russia is a strategic partner for India, and as well as you will be heading the next G20 summit, giving the unprecedented escalation of the missile attacks on Ukraine as G20 summit was happening in Bali. Including these missiles hitting Polish territory. So how do you comment why Russia decided to escalate the attacks on Ukraine exactly when all the leaders were here? How do you read this message, and what is your message to Russia?
Ilya, that's a very complicated one. Let me, what you're asking is, what is our message to Russia? Yes. And what is the other part?
In the context, what is your message in Russia in the context of this escalation that happened during this?
The other element is more speculative. I would probably not give to the Foreign Secretary. Okay, so basically, as we've gone through a lot of the questions. Primarily, they are about our role in the outcome document. You had about Xi Jinping, and there are a couple of elements on specifically. Sir, I'd like to take them. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me, if you permit, club together all the questions, comments that pertain to India's role in the current G20 ongoing summit, both in terms of Honorable Prime Minister's interventions during the summit, as also during the negotiations of the outcome document, which were conducted by our Sherpa and our Su Sherpa under the leadership and guidance of the Prime Minister. India played a key role in the successful negotiations of the outcome document. There were three key elements of this which defined this role. One was approach, which was very constructive, cooperative, and aimed at consensus building across the whole range of issues which were negotiated in the outcome document. Naturally, the outcome document was being negotiated in a particular global context, and that global context did find a mention in the outcome document, also in particular during its negotiations. And there, I would say that Prime Minister's message that this is not the era of war, and that the best way is to return to the path of dialogue and diplomacy to resolve the conflict, resonated very deeply across all the delegations and helped bridge the gap across different parties and contributed to the successful outcome of the document. I will not go into the specific, but this captures the essence of both the approaches which were taken across the whole range of areas, and also the derivative of the Prime Minister's message, which found its reflection in the success of the outcome document. With regard to the question relating to the handshake between the Prime Minister and President Xi Jinping, I will only say that Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping, who were both attending the G20 dinner yesterday, hosted by the Indonesian President, exchanged courtesies at the conclusion of the dinner. With regard to the specific question of our colleague from the Bloomberg channel on message to President Putin, I would only repeat what we have said multiple times on several occasions with regard to the Russia-Ukraine conflict, that the resolution of this conflict, a quick resolution of this conflict through dialogue and diplomacy, is the best way forward for all the parties involved, and in particular in terms of the way the conflict has impacted in its economic dimensions on the developing countries. That's the best way forward to resolve the conflict and mitigate the challenges that we face which are emerging out of the conflict. There was अच्छा, देखिए जो जस्ट फॉर द जो आपने हिंदी में कहा रूपांतर करने के लिए, तो मैं प्रयास करता हूँ। G20 का जो भी आउटकम डॉक्यूमेंट है उसमें भारत की जो भूमिका रही है वो अत्यंत ही सकारात्मक रही है। सहयोग और सहकार्य की भावना से प्रेरित रही है, और इन दो सिद्धांतों के मद्देनज़र जो G20 के विभिन्न डेलीगेशंस में जो भिन्न मत थे उनमें एक कंसेंसस बिल्ड करने में उसका एक बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण योगदान रहा है। जैसे कि मैंने कहा, माननीय प्रधानमंत्री श्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी का जो एक मैसेज था कि दिस इज़ नो टाइम फॉर वॉर, और इस कॉन्फ्लिक्ट को रिजॉल्व करने के लिए डायलॉग एंड डिप्लोमेसी ही सबसे उचित माध्यम है, उस मैसेज का G20 समिट के आउटकम डॉक्यूमेंट के नेगोशिएशंस में एक कंसेंसस बिल्ड करने में एक बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण भूमिका रही, उसका एक योगदान रहा, और एक सकारात्मक रूप से इसका उचित रूप से आउटकम डॉक्यूमेंट में जिक्र भी कहीं ना कहीं आया है। एक आई थिंक ब्रह्म प्रकाश जी का प्रश्न था आतंकवाद से संबंधित। देखिए, G20 समिट में मुख्यतः जो एजेंडा है वो अंतर्राष्ट्रीय आर्थिक सहयोग का रहता है। तो बातचीत और जो सेशन जो तीनों थे, फूड, एनर्जी सिक्योरिटी, हेल्थ, जो तृतीय सत्र जो था वो डिजिटल पे था, तो वार्ताएं और मुख्य संदर्भ इन्हीं तीन क्षेत्रों में था। द्विपक्षीय वार्ताएं अभी माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी की होनी हैं, तो होने से पहले उसमें क्या कहा जाएगा वो शायद कहना इससे ज़्यादा उचित नहीं होगा। लेकिन एक भाग G20 डॉक्यूमेंट का इस प्रकार से ज़रूर प्रस्तावित है, जिसके अंदर जो आतंकवाद से जुड़ी फाइनेंसिंग के मुद्दे होते हैं, काउंटरिंग टेरर फाइनेंसिंग, FATF से मुद्दे आते हैं, और उसमें जो अंतर्राष्ट्रीय आर्थिक संस्थाओं का जो एक भूमिका होती है, उसका ज़िक्र जो है वो अवश्य आता है। और उसमें कहीं ना कहीं जो एक डिजिटल आर्किटेक्चर में जो एक फाइनेंशियल प्रोडक्ट्स होते हैं, जिसका आतंकवादी से जुड़ी फाइनेंसिंग में प्रयोग होने की संभावना हो सकती है, उसको किस प्रकार से, उससे किस प्रकार से चैलेंज है, उसका किस प्रकार से लड़ा जाए, उसकी भूमिका वक्तव्य डॉक्यूमेंट में। लेकिन बाकी मुद्दे जो हैं वो आगे द्विपक्षीय वार्ताओं में संभावित हैं कि उठाए जाएं। अच्छा, I think Prime Minister is perhaps going to live in few minutes, so I think we'll probably have to stop here at this point.
Sorry, we'll have the closing session very shortly. Prime Minister will be going live in that, so we'll close here very quickly.
Yeah.
If you, sir, I think there's one question on the restrictions on G7 price cap. You covered that.
Yeah, okay.
You covered that. If you want to say anything else?
जी, देखिए, when you hear Prime Minister live in shortly, you will, I'm making an assumption here, but I'm sure during his intervention, Prime Minister would be touching upon some of the key priorities that India is going to focus on. But if you heard the Honorable Prime Minister when he launched the logo and the theme of the G20, in his speech, he outlined in quite detail some of the key outlines of our priorities. These priorities will take concrete shape as we assume the presidency from the 1st of December onwards, but it would presumably fall into several key categories which Prime Minister has been speaking about during his multiple interventions over the last few years in international fora. This would be the entire segment of sustainable lifestyles, particularly lifestyle for environment, the entire digital bucket, the digital transformation, digital economy, the challenges of energy and food security, how India can contribute to that, as also building cooperation in the infrastructure space, which doesn't burden the other economies with increasing debt. These were the priorities, and I think as we take over the presidency on 1st of December, it would be our effort, and we found a very strong expression. Already we have seen strong expression of that effort during this presidency. We expect to get strong support from the other G20 members for these and many other priorities that we would come out with as we go along. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Just to close by saying that we also have a bilateral now scheduled with Singapore, which will happen today afternoon, which is just added to it. As you know, we already had inaugural session of the India-Singapore Ministerial Roundtable in September this year, and we expect the leaders to take forward expanding trade and investment linkages, particularly maybe financial, health and pharma sectors. Thank you very much, Foreign Secretary, sir, also Ambassador, as well as Abhay, Su Sherpa. Thank you all for coming and despite the inclement weather. And now we will see the closing session. Thank you.